You're listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, brought to you by Global Convenience Store Focus, featuring senior retail executives and experts in the global convenience, fuels, and mobility retail industry. Welcome to the Future of Convenience podcast. I'm Carolyn Schnare, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dan Munford. Hey, Dan.
Hi, Carolyn. Great to see you again.
Always great to see you. One of the best ways for convenience retailers to consistently improve is to continuously learn, observe, and talk with others in the industry. And one of the best ways to do that is to travel outside your neighborhood and see what best-in-class operators do in their area. Today, we're going to talk about that and explore some upcoming opportunities.
Hey, I'm Frank Gleason. I want to tell you something important. There are so many industry events to attend, it's so hard to decide which ones to go to. I attended Invenco by GVR's Retail Technology Conference in Europe last year. I tell you, it was an absolute game changer. The energy, the insights, connections I made were absolutely incredible. Soon I'll be attending Invenco by GVR's RTC event in the US, and I'm really excited about that. From March 31st to April 3rd, Chicago will be buzzing with the best minds in convenience retail. Registration closes soon, so sign up today. Visit rtc.invenco.com for more information. And hopefully I'll see you all there.
So, Dan, you've experienced so much traveling around the world, visiting retail establishments in every corner, every continent, almost every continent anyway. You're kind of like the Rick Steves of convenience travel as far as I'm concerned. And I think you were doing this even before you made a career right out of studying abroad, right?
I've always loved traveling. Ever since I think I was allowed to travel on my own. I've traveled on my own. So I guess by the age of 24, I'd lived in Paris and Tokyo. I backpacked around India, Pakistan, China, Russia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, parts of Africa. Some really odd places. There probably weren't many convenience stores in those places, apart from notably Tokyo. But I've always had the travel bug. So I think looking back, obviously that was many years ago. But looking back, I just love working with people from other countries. Even perhaps more than I like working with people from my own country. Not that I've got anything against my own country.
Me too, like us.
Yeah, I just like the difference. I just like the difference and the perspective you get from seeing other markets around the world. And today, just as a neat segue, Carolyn, today, we've got someone who, to be honest, and if you look at his air miles, there's not many people that match up to what Mark Wohltmann gets through in a year. And I think particularly, he'll tell us in a minute, but I think particularly the last year, my goodness, how many different markets has Mark visited? So, let's welcome Mark, who is the director of NACS Global, to a podcast today. Mark, welcome.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Carolyn, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on this podcast. And yes, I do have quite a few miles.
So Mark, just before we get into sort of what you've seen from a convenience perspective, have you always been a traveler? Has it always been something that you've done, or have you sort of caught the bug, rather than being born with it? How's the travel bug with you?
Well, I've always been, I'd say I've always been very open, trying to learn and see other cultures, and trying to really understand how people live, how everyday life looks abroad. So I've probably never been really much interested in sightseeing when I was on vacation, but I was more interested in going to supermarkets and see how people shop and how they eat and what they cook and how family life looks like in other cultures. And I guess it then just was a good match with the job that I have now, that these two things go together well.
Absolutely. Now, just thinking about, if we look at what you did in 2020, 2024 and all the different markets you saw, what jumps out at you, in terms of, where you learned most, Mark, in terms of a market and innovation?
It's really hard to pinpoint that to just one location. I always really think that in every part of the world there's something that you can learn, that retailers there do way better than others around the world. And it's never like every retailer does everything right, right? It's there are a lot of areas of improvement everywhere, but everywhere you go, you find that a retailer or an entire industry in that country is doing something outstanding and remarkable where you just think, hey, why is not everyone else copying that, right? Because it's a really good concept.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm gonna press you on that, because
yeah,
that's a very balanced NACS answer, because obviously you don't want to sort of, you don't want to you don't want to be preferential to any particular members, but not thinking about the retailers, but thinking about the market. I mean, surely, I mean, I
yeah,
remember when NACS organized this fantastic event, Convenience Summit Asia in Shanghai, and it was one of those. We all went there and we thought, wow, I've never seen anything quite like this, and I came away from that with that experience. And I know you've been working on your plans for Tokyo, which is just coming
yeah.
up, the CSA in Tokyo. And obviously, I know Japan very well, but I'm very out of date, in terms I haven't been there for a while. Um, didn't I mean, when you were in Tokyo, didn't you sort of did you see stuff that made you think, well, this is not happening elsewhere? I haven't seen this anywhere else.
Absolutely, and you're right. I mean, so there is no one specific region or country that you can say they are the best overall in everything. But we see that in Europe, especially in Ireland, it is the destination for food service in convenience retail. I think they really have a high excellence in that. If you want to look for operational excellence behind the scenes, how everything works, that probably is Asia, that is Japan, that is Korea. If you look for future of payments, it has moved from country to country, and with mobile payments, with contactless payments. Probably India, especially in some parts of India, they are very much advanced in that. Then again, if you look into convenience retail with fuel, without fuel, very different story. Around the world, LATAM, fantastic things I've seen in Argentina. The US, always when it comes to customer service, still leading that in many, many ways. Now, Tokyo, as you said, is right around the corner. What's fascinating in Tokyo is really how progressive the companies there think about the future and act on that. You have small convenience stores on every street corner. I mean that in Tokyo, on every street corner. And if you don't know what to look for, you might walk into them and think, yeah, well, it's a small convenience store. So what? But if you look closely, you can see how they improve their food service offer on a very high quality, with very high quality food in a convenience store. So much so that travel influencers on YouTube and Instagram are raving about convenience stores and not about ramen and sushi in Tokyo. And you can also see how technology is really driving the agenda in Japan, in Tokyo. So I'm very excited for what's coming up.
Having not actually been there, I'm gonna totally live vicariously through you. Is the food, um, like I don't know the best way to say it, like standard? Like if you came to the U.S., you expect hot dogs and maybe some pizza and things like that. But in these stores, is it like just different and not like normal to the area?
So across Japan, I would say it's more or less the same offer of everywhere in Japan, but people eat out a lot. They
Mm.
have a lot of sandwiches there, freshly made sandwiches that are really really good, like the classic triangle sandwich, but they call them sandos. You have your egg sandos, your fruit sandos, but you also have like a specialty there is a salted boiled egg in the shell, right? So you buy a boiled egg in the shell and you open it up and it's salted. I didn't know that that was possible, so I had to look it up and Google it. How do you get the salt into that egg? But there's a way to do that. And you, of course, have all the rice snacks and so on. What they are very famous for are their chicken tenders. It's basically a chicken thigh breaded and deep fried. And all the big chains have their own version of that, and they are just awesome. They are not expensive, and you could live all the time that you're there just on convenience store chicken.
What's the weirdest thing you've seen on your travels, Mark? Let's just add a bit of levity into the conversation here.
Yeah.
What's the I like your post because you always try and find something amusing. I mean, and it keeps you going, doesn't it, when you're on these long trips? I mean, so What's the weirdest thing you've seen on your travels?
It's a very good question, and probably it's a question of perspective, where you come from. So what do you think is weird, right? Because quite often what I see, where I have a question mark in my head, that is something that is very normal for the locals there, right? But vice versa, if they come to my country, they would probably have lots of question marks. Why is it being done like that? But let me reference one thing again, Tokyo, just because I've been there a number of times over the past couple of weeks to prepare everything. Um, in Japan, they actually sell chicken sushi or chicken sashimi. So that is raw pieces of chicken.
Ooh.
And if you listen to this anywhere else in the world, you might think, whoa, that's a health risk.
Yeah.
But this shows when I talk about operational excellence, I think
Mm.
Japan is the only country where you can do that. They have processes in place and they actually stick to the process. It is very highly regulated who can handle raw chicken and how can you serve that. And you will not get sick because that is handled in a way there is not a single bacteria on there or whatever. And it tastes amazing.
Well, that's interesting. So you actually tasted it as well, Mark. But that's a great answer.
That's brave.
So, I mean, just
Yes.
staying on these markets. I think that I think NACS have got two very good markets in the diary this year because obviously Tokyo is always interesting. I'm always interested to hear about Tokyo. I wish I was going to CSA. I'm not, unfortunately, but I will be in Denmark for Convenience Summit Europe. And Copenhagen is another really, really interesting market where there's lots of stuff going on. Um, Tell us a bit about what you've seen in Copenhagen, Mark, because I know that's another market you've spent some time in, and I'll chip in on that because I've spent a lot of time there lately as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know the market very well, and I think the key element that everyone has in their head when they think about Denmark is what 7-Eleven basically started in Denmark and achieved is the focus on better for you food service items or food items, and how they managed to not just bring it into the store but really make it a focus. And with that, shifting the perception of convenience stores in their community, but also attracting completely different target groups that they did not have before. And after they started it, basically everyone jumped onto the bandwagon. And you can see across convenience stores, no matter what brand in Denmark, this focus on healthier for you options, better for you options, and a lot to learn from. Because I remember not that long ago, healthy was being treated as, yeah, consumers say that, and you need to show a salad somewhere in your store, but it's a niche, and in the end, they buy something else anyway. Now, that's not the case anymore. This is a highly profitable business, and it is something you can learn from Denmark how to deal with it.
I completely agree with you, Mark. And on the tasty, healthy food that's tasty point, I think it's absolutely key. So when I'm in Denmark, as you do, we tend to eat out of convenience stores when we're on these trips, don't we? It's actually a pleasure in Denmark to do that because the food is so good. And I mean, talking to Jesper Ostergaard, who's obviously the managing director of Reitan in the Reitan business in the Danish market, which obviously, and the work that Jesper has done over many years with his team, has obviously driven the quality of their food. I suppose the other interesting aspect to it, Mark, and you'll know all about this, is the small sort of innovative suppliers that they bring on and encourage, and they have a kind of Shark Tank process where they get them to pitch, and then they partner up with them and they support them with their packaging and marketing and stuff like that, and help them grow, don't they? And there's it's not an overnight transition that they've been on in that market, is it, Mark? It's something which is really well thought out and is really, really impressive, I think.
It absolutely is. I fully agree. And at our Convene Summit Europe coming up end of May in Copenhagen, we will actually have Jesper on stage talking about that together with some of his startup companies. I guess the big learning is you don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to invent everything yourself. There are companies and people out there that are brilliant. Just find them, work with them, support them, and then you will be the first one who can benefit from that. Earlier this year, we had our Convenience Leaders Exchange Latin America in Buenos Aires, and YPF in Argentina built one big petrol station, very costly, very huge. And they worked with partners to put everything in there, not because everything will work at that site, but to learn from it and to see how can you use that and utilize it across your network. So you have one element where you really work with partners, you support partners, you bring them in, you sometimes you fund them because they are small startups, but then you have that great big idea and you can use it across your entire network. And I think what Jesper has done in Denmark really shows that it works.
Staying on that for a minute, Mark, this is like the applied learning section of the podcast. What can you think of a retailer? Jesper is a great example, but another retailer that has been on some of these tours over the years. It doesn't have to be recent. That went somewhere, followed one of you guys on a visit somewhere, and then took it back, applied it, started it. Was extremely successful. Completely different region. Do any come to mind that just really benefited from this travel?
So when we ask our members around the world, what do you need? Where can we help? The answer is always the same. We need to talk. As an industry, we need to talk. We need to exchange. We need to talk retailer to retailer, retailer to supplier, supplier to supplier. If we want to advance the industry, we need to talk. And that's what we do as NACS Global, right? It's a network that brings people together to learn from each other and to move our industry ahead. And I think everyone who has done that has always been going away from any of these meetings or store tours with at least one idea that they can bring home, even if it is just bringing a strange looking idea back home to the team, and they use that as a base to develop something completely different. What comes to mind is actually one retailer that probably shows the best how to use that information. It's a single site retailer here in the US, actually. Um, he runs a big truck stop, so it's a huge operation, but it's only one site. And he came to many international events with us. And then we visited him and asked him, I mean, why do you do that? Why do you spend all that money and time to visit all around us all around the world? And he said, well, I'm going to show you. Look over there. See those electronic shelf labels? I found those when we visited stores in Warsaw 2 years ago. Do you see those secondary displays I have there? I found a manufacturer like that when I was with you in South Africa and we toured Johannesburg. And then he showed us around a couple of things where he just took one idea from every place that he has been, but he implemented that into his store. I mean, it's way easier for someone who only has one store. So if you're a big operation, you have hundreds or thousands of stores, it's more difficult to scale it, but it's the same idea and principle.
Makes perfect sense. I always remember the example that I was told by Spa in Ireland that they had it was a few years ago, and they introduced a wok for cooking, a wok kind of program. And I asked them, where'd you get that idea from? And they said, oh, well, we got it from Asia, which obviously is not a surprise. And then we were making a film about a retailer. It was another retailer in China, and they'd actually copied the wok idea from the concept of how it was put together from Ireland and taken it back to China, which, when you think about it, is kind of amusing, because that's where the cooking came from. So yeah, these ideas come around, don't they? One thing I wanted to ask you about, Mark, is well, you've had one recent announcement and then one announcement which was very important, which I just wanted to talk to you about. But the recent announcement, which I just wanted to say, well done to NACS, and also well done to George Zeng, is signing George. Signing a new striker. If we were a football team, that would be a very popular choice of striker, and a very effective player in the global convenience business, if I can continue the analogy as well.
Oh yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, we are thrilled to have George on board as our director Asia Pacific, being based in Guangzhou in China. And I mean, the way we operate our NACS Global network is with a very lean organization. As an association, that is how we operate, and we heavily rely on our NACS relationship partners. We have 16 partners around the world, like you, Dan, people that really know the industry, that are experts in the industry, people that we don't pay for helping us out, right? I think that is important also to mention. But where we really form some kind of symbiosis to make sure we exchange information, we learn from each other. But with that, you can only go so far, right? And we realize that Asia Pacific is a region that is really growing fast, where a lot of change in our industry is happening, and that we just need more focus as NACS Global on that region. George has been a NACS relationship partner for the past 15 years, and now we signed him on as our director Asia Pacific. So very thrilled to have him on board.
Well, I think everybody will be so, and will applaud that. The last thing I wanted to ask you, Mark, was I think if you look at any of the sort of leaders in our industry who've really made an impact over the last few years, in fact decades, and really, really impressive people, that are pleasure to work with. Obviously, Henry Armour is up there with the best of them, isn't he? And maybe it'd be great just to round off with an update from you on Henry's next steps.
Oh, yes, of course. I mean, so NACS has been around for more than 60 years. And in our over 60 years of existence, we always only had three president and CEOs, each of them serving roughly 20 years. Same with Henry, right? He joined us, I think, around 20 years ago. He will stay on as our president and CEO for the remainder of this year. We formed a search committee made up of members that are looking for a new CEO who will take over on January 1st, 2026, which is when Henry will not go away. So he will stay on as head of international. So I will be working very much and very much more than today with Henry, and we will together continue, build, grow, and maintain our NACS Global network.
Well, you probably won't be doing any less traveling if I know Henry.
No, probably twice as much.
Well, this has really been fantastic, Mark. And any of our listeners, if you don't already follow Mark Wohltmann or Dan Munford on LinkedIn, you best do that, because you're going to find some really fun stories, some really cool tips and tricks. And I'm also going to watch really closely to make sure you make it out well after the chicken sashimi when you're in Japan soon. So I definitely follow those guys. So thank you, Mark, for joining us today. Safe travels to both of you over the coming months.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Mark. See you again soon.
And we would very much appreciate it. If you love the show, go ahead and hit that 5th star on the 5-star rating. Give us a review if you're so inclined. And be sure to subscribe and follow our show to hear new episodes as they drop every other Tuesday. And thank you all for listening to The Future of Convenience. You've been listening to the Future of Convenience podcast, produced by Dan Munford, Nick Scherzer, Jenna Ferguson, and Lorraine Evans. It is produced, edited, and mixed by Carolyn, Schnare, and music is provided by Jukebox Music. Learn more at globalconveniencestorefocus.co.uk.